Okay, I'm going to show you how to do the heat shrink stuff. You already have your soldering iron out, and we don't have a heat gun. You don't really need one if you're careful. So you have the heat shrink tubing, kind of like this one. This is right over the diode, and I just moved it over after I got done soldering. I have one over each section of this wire here so that it doesn't touch the other wires. What I want you to do is just use your soldering iron because you already have it and it's already hot. And be very careful. You don't want to actually touch the heat shrink tubing, right? You want to just put the soldering iron just right underneath of it so that the heat rises up and heats up the tubing, and just kind of gently hold it underneath and maybe move it back and forth a little bit, but it'll take about a minute or so, and you'll start to see the tubing actually shrink. Right, so this heat shrink tubing will shrink and conform right down to the wires, um, so that nothing gets in the way of your wires. Just move it along. Try not to touch the heat shrink tubing because it will burn, and definitely don't touch your fingers because they will also burn. But once I've got it, I think I've got it down there enough. Make sure you're not touching any other parts of the wires. Just using this, not the tip of your soldering iron, but kind of just using the barrel of your soldering iron here to kind of move the heat shrink tubing around back and forth like that. And then you can see that it's melted on there a little bit, so now heat shrink tubing won't allow anything to get in there, and it won't allow that heat shrink tubing to move so that these wires won't touch each other. Right, so the bare parts of the wires won't touch each other. So I'm going to do it now here on the diode so you can see it. I'll hold my soldering iron kind of right underneath of the heat shrink tubing and just let the heat rise up and shrink the tubing, and you can kind of see it melting there. If you do it really nice and slow, it'll melt and just conform itself right onto the wire. You might do it on one side and then flip it over and do it on the other side. It'll melt. Now you can do this with a heat gun, but if we were in school, we might have a heat gun. You can do it with your soldering iron. You can do it with your glue gun, whichever way makes the most sense to you. Since you already have your soldering iron hot, since I already have my soldering iron hot from soldering the wires together, I'm going to go ahead and just use it. Just use it to heat up the heat shrink tube. Kind of cool. You can just watch it conform itself right to the shape of the wire. Now I touched it a little bit there, and you can see it smoking. It's fine. You just don't want to touch it too much because the heat shrink tubing will burn. It'll burn a hole in it, and you got to start the whole process over. The heat shrink tubing is nice and melted right onto the diode.